Hello, I'm Yusuf Johnson, and this is Color Current. Donald Trump has been making so many radical and often racist changes since he came into office that it's easy to begin to see all of these moves from Trump as individual attacks against democracy. However, I'm now sure that Donald Trump is following a blueprint for a much more permanent goal to create a new form of pseudo-slavery, or what I call slavery 2.0. Now, I can hear you saying that this is just some hyperbole and an exaggeration, but I intend to lay out how these efforts align to one very clear goal. Let's first discuss the assault on the government workforce. Even though Black Americans are 14% of the population, we are 18% of the government workforce. With there being 3 million people in the federal workforce, about 540,000 Black Americans could have their jobs in jeopardy if Donald Trump and Elon Musk are able to cut 75% of the federal workforce. Even the language used to target government workers is similar to the language used in the past to discredit the capabilities of and the hard-working nature of people of color, as remote workers have been targeted with an engineered perception that they do not work at all, despite the fact that modern technology allows for the easy monitoring of people, whether they are remote or in the office. Elon and once Vivek let slip that they really intended to insist remote workers come back to the office to shrink the government workforce by eliminating dissatisfied workers who are forced to return to the physical workspace.
We will also require that federal workers must return to the office in person.
People do need to go back to work, in my opinion, because everything's over now.
Therefore, the attack on the government workers is the first prong of this attack on people of color and their employment. The second attack is against the private sector. Trump and his minions have turned an obvious good in a multicultural country, diversity, into a pejorative. According to Donald Trump, he wants people to get hired on merit rather than race. I mean, it sounds good, right? But in the United States, it is painfully obvious that historically merit has often mattered little in many easy to see circumstances for many people that we celebrate today. Let's start with the father of the country, George Washington. When George was an elementary school dropout from a broken family home, he was able to get a surveyor's license, and even though he didn't finish an apprenticeship, he was made a surveyor of Culpeper County in Virginia because of who he knew. After he quit that job, his brother Lawrence, who was an officer in the military, made him feel like he could be an officer. So just like that, his connections made him not a first or a second lieutenant or even a captain, but skipped them all the way up to a major. Old George was incompetent in his job. He was sent to Ohio, my home state, to deliver a message to the French that they should leave that territory. The French told him no. And then they gave him and his men some food and winter clothes and then just sent them on their way back. However, when Washington bumped into some of the French emissaries on the same type of mission he was on to tell the British that they should leave, Washington didn't just give them their food and send them on their way, but he killed and scalped them. This incident most likely started the French and Indian War, and it was also considered a big mistake. So, whatever happened to this incompetent leader? Well, because of his rich connections, he was able to marry a wealthy woman, get property, and enslave Black folks to work for him, and eventually was able to take command of the entire military and soon become our first president. This is not an isolated tale, but is one of the many accounts of famous white Americans that we to this day celebrate, who did not make it because of merit, but were handed opportunity after opportunity until they finally succeeded. Things were always very different for Black Americans. While good old George was handed first, second, and third chances until he became the father of this country, Blacks were enslaved, not building assets, and finally held back through Jim Crow and racism until laws in the 1960s, like the Voting Rights Act, finally ensured that Black people could begin to climb up the ladder. However, the task Blacks faced was daunting. Let's look at one particular target of the Republicans, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Consider the military. which was also swept up into the Republican anti-DEI push. In the 1971 Department of Defense report, the report found that because of disparities on how African Americans were being used in the Vietnam War, racial tensions were running rampant, leading to incidents of violence within military units, particularly during periods of high stress and combat situations. Also, when considering cohesion itself within any body of people, it is very important for any group that relies on multiple races and genders working together to have tools to help these different groups of individuals tasked with bonding together to effectively do this. The United States Air Force, for example, have a program called Social Actions. When I joined the Air Force in 1994, during basic training, I was attending a social actions briefing. Now, social actions at the time was kind of like a DEI program, but before the Republicans made that a bad word, with the stated goal of ensuring that all Air Force members are treated with dignity and respect. A lofty goal. It makes sense. I remember when I took the training, at the end of the class, during an open forum, a young white airman stood up and expressed how he had never been around, and then he used the incorrect term, colored people before. Now, he was gently corrected, but then he went on to say how valuable the class was for him to teach him about the other cultures he would be working with. I remember that everyone of all colors applauded and seemed to agree with his statement. So let's fast forward many years to July the 13th, 2023, when a Republican congressman, Eli Kane, in trying to justify removing diversity training from the military, used the same term that the young airman used in 1994, colored people, when referencing black people.
My amendment has nothing to do with whether or not colored people or black people or anybody can serve, okay? It has nothing to do with
Mr. Speaker.
Skin.
This very statement helped to highlight exactly why this type of training is so useful by the fact that the congressman still did not know the proper terminology to reference us. But the Republicans are undeterred as they attack diversity, not only in the military, but also in the private sector. Republicans are also attacking companies like Costco, who have refused to remove their diversity programs to push these private sector companies to follow the government into being less diverse. Then, the question have to be asked, but to what end? Why attack these programs? Because it appears that the goal of the Trump administration is to make American companies no longer prioritize hiring diverse individuals so that the only people they really have to hire are white men. But won't there be legal ramifications for doing that, you might ask? What, like filing a grievance with the EEOC? Donald Trump took over the EEOC and instructed them to halt civil rights cases and focus on racism against white men. Therefore, corporations are now allowed to discriminate openly, and the legal resources for minorities to fight back are being removed. The other part of the plan is to remove millions of migrating people of color. This will have two goals. As David Duke in the 70s wanted to do when he was the Grand Wizard of the KKK, stopping migration through Mexico would reduce the growing brown population in America.
The message of middle America, saving our heritage in this country.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best.
Duke is a big fan of Trump's signature issue to build the border wall and stop the flow of illegal immigrants.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
I believe in making America great again. I go a bit farther than Trump.
You want to make America white again?
I'm not saying make America white again. I'm saying preserve the principles and the people who made America great in the first place.
But this will also have another effect. Currently, these migrants tend to take on a lot of the lower paying jobs like harvesting within our agricultural industry. According to a 2021 Farm Labor Statistics study, 70% of our farm workers are immigrants. But to Donald Trump, during his campaign for president, these are black jobs.
His big kill on the black people is the millions of people that he's allowed to come in through the border. They're taking black jobs now, and it could be 18, it could be 19, and even 20 million people. They're taking black jobs, and they're taking Hispanic jobs.
Therefore, if you remove millions of immigrants, you will have a large hole to fill in these low-paying agricultural jobs. Finally, another part of the plan is to reduce the overall availability of work in this country. You could do that by purposefully wrecking the economy, such as the new tariffs against our largest trading partners, China and Mexico and Canada. Naturally, a move like this could reduce employers as their costs to operate drive them out of business. Trump could then redirect grants to stabilize the businesses that are loyal to his agenda and have helped to fight back against diversity. This will shrink the hiring pool to mainly those companies that openly discriminate and thrust minorities into a position where survival will dictate that we will have to look for the only jobs that are available. Finally, this brings us back to Trump's black jobs. So without many options or legal recourses for companies that now choose to hire only one demographic, desperate minorities will be forced to go to work in the fields of America for low wages, trapped in a system where educational opportunities are now limited and movement out of this state will be limited by both finances and the laws that give preferences to those in the majority. Furthermore, by restricting abortion, women will be forced to have babies even if they are not financially prepared, and with less companies that cannot discriminate against women in employment, they will be stuck in a Stepford wife type of scenario. Therefore, congratulations, America. The conditions are ripe and the scales have been tipped towards a new form of pseudo-enslavement, basically slavery 2.0. I want to thank you for watching my video. Be sure to hit the like button, the subscribe button, because we will be coming out with much more content soon. And also, I want to give a shout out to my daughters, Lauren and Shani Sharif, for the magic behind the video.